Hey you guys, Mickey here. I hope you're doing well. I'm making a video on planting Irish potatoes because even though they are marginal in Houston, we can still do them and still get a yield out of them. They're a really cool plant in just how fast they're able to produce food. So the real trick with potatoes is they need a lot of fertility, they need really cool weather, and they need no frost. So that's really tough for us here in Houston because we have cool weather and frosts come randomly during our winter, and the chickens are eating my seed potatoes. So anyway, so that's why it's really hard for us to grow, and the real key is your planting date for growing Irish potatoes. Our window for planting is basically between now, which is kind of, let's call early January, and middle of February is probably the latest. So like Valentine's Day, between now and Valentine's Day is our Irish potato planting time. They need that nice cool spring weather in order to grow well. As soon as it gets warm, they start flowering and setting seed, and so they're not gonna produce as much after that. And once it gets hot, they're toast. So really small window and really short season, and because of that, we don't get these massive yields. So if you're really thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get 10 pounds of potatoes from one potato, no, it's more like maybe 3 pounds in a really good year, which is still something though. It's still something, and that's just depends on the spring. So with an early planting, you need to be prepared to protect it from frost. That's a huge thing. The plants are always sensitive. Anyway, what I've got here, so I'm growing in the bins to protect it from the chickens. Not so much that I think they eat potato, but rather that they're gonna dig wherever I'm planting, they see me plant. So I'm planting in these two. This has a little kohlrabi, and I'm just gonna plant around it. And like all my other planters, this is, let's see, this is straight compost. So fairly raw, unfinished. You can still see the leaves and things, but there's a good bit of life in it. That's down below. This top layer is very thick, but very raw. Down below it's a little more composted, and so that's why I've got this little bit of ag lime. It's probably 1.5 pounds of ag lime, sure, between these two, and that's more than necessary. Now it's really just enough. I didn't even use all of it. Just enough to make sure that there's calcium there. I think that there's a good bit in that active decomposition that frees up a little bit of calcium that's there, but because there's not a big mineral component to compost, that's often what's missing. So the magnesium and calcium in dolomitic ag lime will help. And so for planting, here are the potatoes I'm going to plant. And what's cool about these is they have lasted in the fridge since last year. So these were the small ones. Not that new potatoes are bad, but I was just saving some for seed to see how they would last, and they lasted all the way since probably May, I think, is when I pulled them out. So they've been in the refrigerator for 6 months in the vegetable crisper inside a brown paper bag, and they've obviously said it's time, we gotta go. So they're ready to go. So if you're growing potatoes and you don't have your own seed, these are a blue potato, which is cool and different. If you don't have your own seed, and the chickens are now going to eat them. If you don't have your own seed, then you can get it from the grocery store. All those potatoes will grow just fine. Really the only difference between a store potato and a seed potato is time and exposure. So if the potatoes are exposed to a little bit of light, allowed to kind of be stressed, then all those factors will start it sprouting its eyes and forming its eyes. And once that process is started, the whole reason you get seed potatoes is because that process takes a little time, and then they're coming up out of the ground faster. So you leave your potatoes on top of the refrigerator, and then they start to sprout, and then you plant them, and if the timing is good, then you'll get a good yield out of it. So spacing on potatoes. Here in Houston, we don't get big potato plants. They're probably more like maybe 2 feet by 2 feet, so in that range. Nothing like the 3-foot round ball that you could get if you were in a longer season. So our potato plants are going to be a little smaller. So the spacing should be probably about 18 inches. That's 12 to 18 inches if you want them really close together. you can get away with that, and that's probably normal. I actually haven't looked it up. Anyway, so I'm going to plant three in this pot and 4 in this pot, and that'll be my space. And I got a couple others. I'm going to plant them in between the broccoli to kind of succession plant and have that going on, because it's still going to take them a couple weeks to really get up and out of the ground. So here's how I plant. That's all the lime is going to get washed down. So I'm getting down into the nice good composty area, probably about I'd say that's 4 inches deep, and then I'm covering it, and I guess that's not really that exciting. What is cool, and what's something that you will see and learn, is that because potatoes are growing the tubers off of their stem, if you add material, it lengthens the stem space, so potentially gives you more room to grow, to get potatoes. So if it's a happy, healthy plant, it's going to make potatoes either way, but you've seen those pots where they keep adding, and that gives more stem space. So it's a really long season, which we don't have in Houston. If you had a really long season, then you could get more potatoes. But I'm going to do the same. I'm going to have all this space because the compost is already settled, and I'm going to be able to add compost around the base of these potatoes as they're growing. Hopefully the chickens will let them grow, so we'll see. Anyway, time to get planting. I've got mostly the blue potatoes and a couple red potatoes. So let's see. And these are much farther sprouted than you really want, because I'm likely to damage the stems. All right, so they're in, and now it's just a matter of waiting and seeing, and really hoping that we don't get any frost in the next month, or really once they're up. So if we get a frost this next weekend, they should be fine, but once they're up and out of the ground, can't really even protect them that well. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But also with potatoes, be ready to plant again around Valentine's Day, and then you'll definitely get some potatoes from that crop, even though it's a little bit shorter season. All right, you guys,